Welcome to the DFIRmas podcast. This is the seasonal short series podcast by ArcPoint Forensic, hosted by Amy Moles. In this episode, I am joined by Alexis Brignoni to discuss the importance of validating your results in your digital forensic cases. Alexis Brignoni is a distinguished expert in the field of digital forensic, specializing in mobile device analysis, investigative technologies, and he is known for his innovative contributions to the digital forensic community. Alexis is a practitioner, educator, and speaker who shares his expertise through research, open source tools, and insightful presentations. His work is widely respected for advancing methods of extracting, interpreting, and validating digital evidence in support of criminal investigations and cybersecurity efforts. If you'd like to reach out to Alexis, please be sure to check out the description below where we summarize the resources referenced throughout this episode and where you can find him. I feel like I haven't done a podcast in so long. Okay, so validation is one of the hottest topics right now for both tools and as well as work being done by examiners. So can you kind of explain to me what digital forensic tool validation is and why it is so important for the forensic process?
So when I have these conversations, definitions are important, right? And I say that because we talk about validation, and it's not wrong talking about in this way, and we do it in the way that we talk about validation and verification, and sometimes we treat them as the same thing. Oh, I verified my tool, I validated my tool, and as a general use, that's okay. But for these type of conversations, definitions are important. So the definitions that I like is the one from, for example, SWCDE, where they speak about how validation speaks to establishing that a tool is reliable, that is efficient, right? And not only tools, also techniques and procedures, right? So that's validation. Now, they define verification in the sense that these tools, these techniques, these procedures, they work as expected. So I like to have these type of conversations, making a clear line between validation and verification. And they might sound the same, but they're not the same.
Right. Okay. So when you're going through, so SWCDE, what is do they have like processes and guidance that's a community built procedure? Like what exactly is that?
Oh no, they have tons of checklists, and I think we can speak a little bit later about some of those resources. Now, the thing with verification versus validation is that like tools, right? You take tools and you validate tools, and you use the verification of outputs to do that validation. Okay, and one kind of goes with the other, but just because something is verified doesn't mean that the tool is validated, right? And
Right.
that's important because we talk about tool validation. We need to make sure that our tools and the big operating words are reliable. Are our tools reliable? Can I put a whole bunch of data in it and get those outputs and work on them as is? That doesn't mean you won't verify them, or certain, depending on certain circumstances. But since we work, at least on the digital forensics aspect, right? We work in the realm of law, and you can do intrusion work, incident response work all day long, right? But the forensic part of it is that you have to do it in a way that's acceptable at court, be it criminal, be it civil, whatever it is. That's what makes it forensic, and the reliability, repeatability, what makes it scientific. It's key, and we establish that by doing validation and verification in a proper way.
Okay, so what is the difference between like general tool testing and certification, like certifying a tool?
So, I mean, certification, it depends. For example, I mentioned SWCDEs, right? But the ISOs have a definition of validation and verification. And the software industry had different, and they're pretty much similar to each other. So depending on the context, maybe the term for the proper use or a validated tool is a certification of that tool. When, for example, if you have to calibrate it to a certain standards or to a certain tolerances, well, the tool is now certified to do those things, right? And to me, I see that also as kind of a validation within a different context. The big takeaway from that is that your tools, techniques, and procedures, right? It's not only the buttons you press, it's the things that you do, even how you write your report, right? They have to have some standards, right? And we need to adhere to those standards, and they have to be repeatable. And that's a really big operating word.
Right. Yeah. So what does repeatable mean to you? And why do you think it's like such a misconception in the industry? Because I think like from when I speak to different individuals, I'm like, oh, it's repeatable. I just select the buttons and the same output is presented, right? That's very different from like if you have a hard drive and you're trying to do a repeatable process to prove it in court.
Well, for example, right? So let's give me an example of validation and verification, right? You have a clock, and you can look at the clock, and you want to validate that clock. Well, you look at the output. Is it 3 o'clock now? And you look, it is 3 o'clock. All right, good. Then therefore my clock is validated. It gives me the correct time. But a broken clock will verify itself twice a day, and does not make the clock validated just because you have verified some outputs. Does that example help a little bit?
No, it does. Yeah.
So we gotta be really careful here in regards to validation and look, maybe I'm skipping ahead in the conversation, but especially with some automated processes that involve AI, machine learning, and all that, just because you can verify outputs, a validated tool does not make because of that repeatability aspect. And this speaks to validation procedures to include large data sets, multiple use cases, regression testing, and we can talk about that as time permits. Those are things to consider, because just because you get some correct outputs does not mean your tool is validated. And when your tool is not validated, even though it works for certain things, then you have to be extremely careful how and when you use them and for what particular use cases you're doing so.
Yeah. And I love that you use the clock just example, because that actually happened to me recently. I thought I
Yeah.
was losing my mind. I got in my car and the clock in my car said it was like 9:02, and I'm like, there's no way. I time traveled from the time that I left the door to the time that I got into the vehicle, and I have the GPS time
Uh,
tracker like on my car, and it was off by like 10 minutes. It's like, yeah, I was validating with my watch, with my phone. Like, I was like,
every time I
how is
have
this happening?
daytime saving, lifetime thing. My car is old, so it's an update like that, and I go, it's like, wait, it's too much light outside to be this time. All right, I need to change the clock. The time savings change. So I feel you.
Oh my gosh, I thought I was losing my mind. So, okay, so do you think there's ever a circumstance that presents itself where we can skip validation?
I wouldn't say skipped. I would say you
I
can
felt like I could feel your energy. It was like, oh, I want to cringe.
Um,
No.
I think the best case I'm not best. I think the only, from my perspective, it can be delayed, right? So let's say you have an exigent circumstance and you need to do something on the spot, whatever that is, right? You will do it. That doesn't mean you just skipped it, right? You have to go back and make sure.
Yeah.
So that's why examiners and any type of field, the notes of what you're doing at the moment you're doing are important. And you might have to come up with a procedure on the spot because the exigent circumstance requires it, right? I might not have my right blocker on me, but I need to do something now. I will take those notes, but then I will go back and with my notes, I will try to make sure I can do that validation of different procedures to make sure that we have the best case scenario. And if something didn't go as planned, that we can explain why that happened and how that impact or does not impact the work that we did on that moment, right? So I wouldn't say skip, but definitely delayed, but it has to be done. It can't be just forgotten about. It has to be done.
Absolutely. Okay, so then do you have like an example of when you didn't validate a result, or someone on your team didn't validate a result and a consequence that resulted in that?
I'll speak to an example that's in the press. That was in the press some years ago.
Okay.
So there was this case. There was a child was found missing. I mean, was missing, and later he was found to be dead. And to the whole process, there was a search done. And when I say these, people know what the case is. There was a search done on the computer for the word chloroform. All right,
Mm-hmm.
and and the tool said it
Like
was
a keyword search.
yeah, key like a search, right? And it was
Okay.
search, and that was, remember, chloroform kind of knocks people out. So it kind of, if correct, if that word was searched all those multiple times, I don't remember the exact number, but I'm gonna say 30. But it was a pretty large amount. That would
Okay.
speak to a theory of the case of how the suspect might have tried to drug the child in the process of killing the child or something like that. Okay. Well, That was presented at court. Yeah, these searches were done this amount of times. And during the trial, it was found that it was not searched that many times. It was only searched one time, and in no context related to trying to knock out a human or nothing like that, right? So they have to bring the person that the software developer to explain at court that that was wrong. All right, so come on, like, do we don't want to be in that position, right?
Absolutely not. No.
And that could have been done by the examiners looking at the source data and doing a verification of that tool. Okay, and I'm gonna make a quick point here. Just because your tool is validated does not mean you're not gonna verify your output. And let me constrain that, because if you tell me, well, if I'm verifying every output, then what's the point of validating, right? You want to verify your smoking gun evidence or your smoking gun data. The most important things you want to verify, even if it's been validated, even if your tool has given you correct output within those circumstances, because circumstances change and that might require new validation, right? But still, your smoking gun evidence, you need to verify, even if your tool's been validated for that particular purpose. Because at the end of the day, it's not the tool doing the testifying, who's doing the testifying. You're doing the testifying. And I don't want to have to bring the software developer to tell me, yeah, I really screwed up on that one, my bad, in the middle of trial, right?
No. And also, I feel like that's like a general like life lesson, right? For a lot of big things in your life. When you're making a big decision, normally you go through a process of validating those results by going through and getting a second opinion or even a third opinion on what it is that you're looking for to solve for. So why I don't understand why someone would do that in their work, especially with a big case that's going to trial. These are people's lives. So
well, and look, I understand that we have a lot of work, right? And there's different
a ton of work.
Yeah, and there's and look, we it's a human tendency to rely on things if they work, right? If they work once, twice, and three times, and four times, why wouldn't it work the fifth and the sixth, right? And that's a natural tendency. It's I believe. Look, two things. We do that with tools right now, and tools right now, you don't speak to them. You press the buttons, you look at certain reports, and you try to make some proper interpretations and conclusions of those, and then look at the source data. But if we're gonna start talking to the computer and having the computer do some of that pre-analytical work for us, that takes the validation and verification process a whole nother level. And I would contend that verification is impossible for these systems. You can verify their outputs, but verification is not guaranteed because the process is not repeatable. The machine is random. It will you give the machine a question, and it will give you that same answer. You know how many times? Only once. Only once.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you talk to AI and tell them, hey, give me this answer, it will change things a little bit. It might give you more data, maybe less data, but these LLMs will not give you the exact same answer every single time, because there's randomness built in it, right? The system is trying to figure out what's the next word to come, the next token to come, based on what it knows from its training data and randomness. The train is building the train tracks as it's moving, right? So that puts a whole nother spin on how we do our verification and validations if we're using the systems within our workflow. And I have plenty of examples of that. I've been accused in some social media of being I think I have it here.
I was going to say, what is your workflow and like verification, and what is the process? Because I know for some people it can seem like it's like a really taxing, right? Like, ugh, I don't want to redo this process again or something like that. But I feel like, again, in anything in life, once you do it a couple times, then it's not so tedious the next few times. You're just part of the cycle. So what is your process?
Well, look, so the baseline of the process is the most important data forensics tool, right? Is you. You are the tool. And you know, I don't mean, my wife might say I'm a tool, but not that type of tool. A digital forensics tool, right? You are the tool. So you got to spend time to build yourself, to take your training and your upcoming, keep yourself up to date seriously and be part of the community. If you have that, a whole bunch of work can be done pretty quick to include testing and validation. I have a quick meme where I have Nick Cage looking at like this weird face, like what's happening to Pedro Pascal, and Pedro Pascal is looking at Nick Cage like smiling, and the caption is Nick Cage, which is, sad face, is waiting for the tool to finish parsing, and me with my Pedro Pascal face, I'm so happy because by hand I'm already 90% there, right? Um, you are able to do more than you think if you spend and invest in yourself. So that's the first step of validation issue, as the examiner, as the person responsible for the interpretation of this data. Right now, the second step is, which I have some contention with vendors, is the vendors will give you notes, release notes, and tell you what the tool does. You have to go through those, right? And I have a lot of complaints. I don't know if we have time for that, but that should be part of your process. Now, make sure you have known data, and there's plenty of known test samples that you could use. And if your agency is large enough, hopefully they can build a validation process, so that way it can be handed over to a group that handles that, and then the other examiners are free to kind of depend or lean on those, then doing the proper verifications for individual items of high interest. Right now, if you're a small agency, well, I don't have that possibility, then have a couple of sample test data, and run it. And always, again, make sure that you do not depend on one validation only. Just because WhatsApp was parsed today doesn't mean it will be parsed tomorrow or in the same level of detail, because the app changes. So again, you have to look at that in detail. If my chats, more important ones, are WhatsApp, and the tool gave me the chats, that's great. I'm still gonna go in and make sure that that version was properly parsed and that it's not missing something. Quick story: there's this case about this application, and the tool gave us the chats, and it was great. One thing the tool didn't show is that there was a field in the database that indicates who the site administrators are. So from all the people talking in this big chat group, exchanging contraband, we could now determine who the people. I mean, it wasn't me. I say we as examiners, but a colleague in another division. I don't want to take credit for work that I did not do. A colleague in another division figure out, hey, look, we can find who the administrators are, and there are legal penalties for being part of certain groups as the leader of the group. So now these people can be targeted for being the instigators of and the leaders of this group of illegal contraband individuals, right? The only way we did that is through the verification process. We figured out, like I say we, but again, as examiners, we figured out that, look, this a version change. It's still working with the tool. Is there something more, right? Check your smoking gun evidence. Don't just, oh, it's validated, I'm just gonna trust the tool. You gotta verify those big ticket items.
Yeah, so when I was doing digital forensic examinations, we would have other examiners verify our work for us. So that way it was like a peer review process, not just the report. So that way there's the proper grammar and format, but also the work that went into it. So that way there was no like conclusions that people jump to or making the wrong assumptions or maybe misinterpreting the data that they're seeing. I just think it is extremely important, especially when you're dealing with other people's data, lives, like that. What your results are going to have a direct consequence in how this plays out for this individual. So
Jessica Hyde, she has a company, Exordia, and herself and a couple of more folks, and me, another examiner as peer reviews, they made a checklist, a peer review checklist. And it's great because it goes through validation. It's focused on mobile, but you can expand that to any type of digital media. And the checklist goes on how to do that verification, that validation, and then different things that the peer reviewer needs to be aware of, and again, check it off to have a good outcomes. Of course, the list is never all encompassing. No list is all encompassing, but it is a really solid first, second, third, I would say 10th step by using this list, right? I think it's pretty complete on its own, but I always think that no checklist is complete. Always take into account your particular circumstances and apply them properly.
where can you find that checklist? Where is it?
Yeah, so I think if you
Is it
Google,
deeper review?
it's a different, yeah. So if you put Hexordia and then checklist, it should come up as the first link because I use it a lot. So I just Google it. Yeah, just put Hexordia, HEXORDIA checklist. The first link is gonna be to the site, walkthroughs and checklists. And if folks press there, and then it will be under checklist, and there's a peer review for mobile forensics checklist. It was done by Ricky Johnson and Jessica Hyde with now there's an ad in the middle of my view. I mean, close it. And there we go. And Trevor Holt and myself as the peer reviewers of the peer review checklist, which I love it because it's, Jessica walks the talk, right? She's like, "Here's a peer review checklist that was also peer reviewed." So I appreciate
It also
that.
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jessica triple checks her work. So
oh yeah, she's a great friend. I look up to her. An excellent scientist, excellent examiner, excellent at everything she does.
absolutely. I 100% agree with all of those comments. She is a near dear friend of mine too. I worked with her for many, many years and still work with her now in just different avenues and formats. But
Absolutely.
okay, so you already touched on vendors. I kind of want to hear a little bit more about this. So what is the best approach for vendors, right? Because this helps me too. So like, what is the best approach for vendors to follow, like when they're validating their tool sets or providing guidance? Like you had mentioned release notes, and it's a pet peeve of yours. So what, like how as vendors, because ArcPoint Forensics is a vendor, which sounds like a dirty word lately because it's like, I don't know why, but I'm like, I'm a vendor, and they're like, I'm like, no, I'm like a good vendor. But
I'm a practitioner vendor.
Yeah.
Well,
So what can we do better, especially in release notes? Because I'm the person that puts those release notes out. So what can I do?
right. So I will tell you transparency, right? And transparency, it's lacking in this space. If your tool did something now, right, and then the next version doesn't do it, you need to tell us. Don't wait till a community personality tells you, "Hey, this is happening. We're going to talk about it on the next podcast," to spur you to announce it to the community, right?
Yeah, it's not great.
Any similarity with real life is purely coincidental. So the point I'm making with that is I believe you gotta be transparent, and release notes are important. But if you're telling me, well, there's these issues, like the tool is not stop doing something, that's the example that we have for today, but there's many other examples. Don't then say, well, I'm gonna bury it under release notes for the next release, right? So not only are you not letting the community know for whatever 2 or 3 months, depending on what your release schedule is, when you're telling us, you're hiding it in the small font. Who reads release notes? Almost nobody. Now, folks listening and watching, do read your release notes. You have to, right? That's one way of the vendor communicates with you. And the vendor should put the release notes out. But there are certain things that I think transparency requires some urgency, especially if the tool is missing something important, or mobile forensic space that just came one to mind I made up, right? Let's say I have a version of the tool and it gets data from the phone. The new version doesn't get data from that same phone. But why? We did it before. The phone hasn't changed, right? Maybe there's an issue with your regression testing. I don't know, but that needs to be told, because the next person, the examiner, goes, "Oh, it's not supported." Guess what? It's supported on the previous version. Maybe you need to go to the previous version and hook it up there, right? Well, we fixed this. Then you need to tell us. And look, okay, I'll be straight up. If you as a vendor can send me 1 million emails a month about your tools, buy them, they're great, you can send me at least one telling me about the issue, not just hide it in the release notes. Oh, well, we announced it in the portal. Who goes to the portal to read that? I mean, you might go once a year or twice, or to get something specific, because tools auto update. Back in the day, you had to go to the portal, download the latest version, and run it. Now you don't have to even do that, right? The tool just auto updates. So, well, you know, hopefully that makes sense.
Which is sometimes an issue.
Well, true, but don't look. If your marketing has my email, then your testing and regression people also have it. Then put it out there.
Absolutely.
Hey, community, there's some big issues for this release, some capabilities that we lost, something you need to be considered, and hopefully some workarounds. Hey, we made available version 3, that's I made it whatever, version 8 or 11, because we have an issue on 13. And so it's available now again for these particular procedures. Then we'll fix this, and there you're good to go. If vendors are afraid, I guess, of getting bad reputation, quote unquote, and I believe the best reputation comes from transparency, from being in direct. And I think it's the only way to hold vendors accountable. I know it sounds a bit negative about vendors. Look, we wouldn't be able to do the work without the vendors. We appreciate the
Yeah.
vendors, right? Without vendors, we're
Yeah,
some
we're not here to
capabilities.
beat up on vendors.
Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah,
not. No.
yeah. So just because I'm saying this thing that needs to be maybe worked on doesn't mean we don't recognize how key our vendors are. Like, for example, extraction. That's something that vendors do. We kind of outsource it for different reasons, for topic for another day, and they do a good job at it for the most part, right? So no, vendors are great, but I love my vendors. But this type of transparency is important. I understand that the product needs to be sold. I understand that we got marketing professionals that are trying to portray a brand image, and that's fine. So I would spur everybody, not only vendors but also individuals, to build your brand and have transparency as a keystone, as a key piece, right? As a foundation of that brand. And I think folks will be better served, and you as the vendor, your product will be also well served because you will sell more, and people will trust you. Will create that brand connection, right? And look, being straight up with marketing here, Apple computers are great, but they're not the best computers in the world. But they cost like they are.
The
Of
cost
course,
is super high.
yeah, this is a subjective statement because an Apple fan
Also,
person will tell me,
don't listen. My small little MacBook over here. Close your ears.
look. So some folks, look, I use a Mac all the time, so they might tell me, yeah, it's actually the best computer in the world, and that might be the case. But the price point is high. So why is it high? Is it some special technology we haven't seen before? No, we know what technology is, but there's a brand connection of trust, of transparency, of when you get a product, you can expect certain things, and that things reflect your values and who you are, right? I want my tools to reflect my values too. We work in the law enforcement sector, for example, us, then I want my tools to be transparent because I have to be transparent at court. I want my tools to be able to, like, discovery to it not to be an issue, and not only to not to be an issue to the court, but I want the tool to not have any discovery issues with me as the consumer of
Yeah.
that tool, right? And that creates that brand trust that I believe will elevate your company way more than maybe doing the opposite.
Yeah, I never understood like the lack of transparency because I feel like it just will bite you in the butt in the long run because I do not like surprises. I like nice surprises, but not work surprises, right? Like I do not want to find out a customer is upset because they didn't know about something. So you had mentioned sending out emails. So like when we do an update or anything like that, our release notes are just an email blast. And we were originally just keeping them just for current customers, like current active customers, but now we just send it out to everybody because like I don't care. Like, hey, this is what we're working on. And it might be something where maybe we just incorporate a new feature that's important to somebody who isn't a customer of ours right now, which always works out great. Or maybe that customer knows somebody who is a active customer and said, hey, did you see that this one bug is out right now? And, I know you're working at this case and you're using Atria or whatever. So I think it works both ways. The trust piece is 100% important. I have never, at least I've had a really good experience with my vendors. Like when I was actively doing digital forensic cases, is I could call anybody and they would pick up the phone immediately and we could work through an issue. But I'm also the person who didn't read release notes. So I am the problem. I also
like
didn't
Taylor
know at
Swift.
the time, right? I was just like, yeah, like, hi, I'm the person you're talking about. Shamefully. But now, like being on the other side of that, now I know how important they are. And I was like, man, I wish if I could go back and tell, my younger self what I should be doing, it would. There's so many correction points. We don't have enough time on the show.
I just like how you said it, like Taylor Swift. It's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
That's the problem. So, well, I guess kind of like going right into that. So, like, what other advice can you give to vendors or even practitioners, right, to build out that reliability and like that trust, other than being transparent with release notes and stuff like that? Is there anything else that you can recommend, maybe from a practitioner's side of saying like, hey, if you want to build this, these are the questions you should be asking, or this is what you should be doing?
In regards to the vendor relationship or in general?
Yeah, just in general, like regular relationship.
Yeah, so well, I'm gonna speak a little bit about vendors, right? And as a pet peeve of mine lately, make sure you're conscientious about the new capabilities you're adding. If you're adding AI, you got to think about a few things, right? Think about keeping track of those prompts. Will that be needed in discovery? Like, we need to think about those terms, not just only put the capability and let's figure it out later. Because users will depend on those, right? So make sure that as you put new technologies, you're thinking about what the consequences are of the use and presentation in different environments, be it court, be it at a civil dispute, or an investigation into an individual, into violation of company policy, right? So that's a quick note on that. Now, you as the examiner, right? You, if you want to really maximize your time and your work, you cannot do it alone. You have to become part of the community, and you might not have to build a podcast like Heather Chapertino and myself do. Maybe it's a bit too much, right? But you can at least go into LinkedIn, BlueSky, which I think is doing really good now. We're trying to build the DF community back because Twitter now is a heaping trash fire. But it's personal opinion. Personal opinion. I don't speak for my employer, I only speak for myself. So be part of the community, and even if it's just listening, right, or lurking, like the internet word, that's important because the things that are happening before everybody else, and also the solutions. Try to be part of organizations that kind of foment that information exchange. I'm a big proponent of IASIS. Again, it's personal preference. It's in a great organization. We have a listserv. You can ask questions to the listserv. Now, that being said, you have to be a good member of the community. Don't come into the chat asking me something that you could have Googled, because I'm going to frown upon you. You know what I mean? I am not your Google, right? And if I send you a link with the information, don't go off on the title and tell me it doesn't apply. Read it, because I send it to you for a reason. And don't have me tell you, did you even read it? Because if you read it, what you just wrote back would have been answered, right? Again, any similarities to real events are purely coincidental, right? So be part of the community, but also be a good member of the community. Make sure you do, and this is a word and I think it's reading my main thing for examiners. Make sure you do your due diligence. Due diligence is a word that we don't use as much as we should, right? Because it's things you need to do that you owe to your case, you owe to your community members, you owe to other examiners, you owe to yourself. That due diligence is the things that you have to do, and sometimes we just don't. We take all these shortcuts. We try to depend on other people to do the things that we should have done, and then you burden the community and you don't learn. So at a certain level, you have to be responsible for doing your due diligence within your self-training and within the tool usage and within the outputs and your analysis. And the community will help you achieve that. Together, then we will push each other up, right? And the folks that are higher than us will send the elevator down to come get us, right? But you have to be willing to put that work in.
Yeah, and I think when you say be a member of the community, what do you mean in terms of time allocation? Because like you said, you don't have to have a podcast, you don't have to even write blogs if you don't want to. But I think some people are a little like have imposter syndrome, or maybe just like kind of taken back a little bit. Like I have a full-time job. Like I don't need a second full-time job to participate in all these forums and stuff like that. So how much time allocation, especially for someone who's starting out, what do you think that is? Like maybe an hour a week?
Look, I can assure you that if people allocate 1% of their Instagram scrolling time to reading about these topics, they would be geniuses. All right. And let's be real here. I mean, I know we're busy. The way I killed that bird with one stone is that I do my social media on this. So that way,
Yeah.
But
you don't feel as guilty, is that what you're saying? Like
exactly.
If you blend it together.
I'm doing my training time. Community time. That's what my Instagram, my BlueSky, Instagram, LinkedIn is. It's community time. But all kidding aside, if you allocate some of that social media time, a tiny bit of it, I think of it as reading a newspaper. So, for example, Gilmore, a great guy, Australia, I've known him for many years. He does a little summary of what the big news for the week are in forensics. Forensics. Oh my God, I forgot. Can you remind
This
me?
Week in Forensics.
This Week in Forensics. Yes, I was thinking of my own podcast name. This Week in Forensics. Start there. It's a weekly. You can read it, and then you can any items of interest to your type of work. You can press them and read a few of those, like a newspaper. People don't read newspapers anymore, but think about it that way. In your morning, as you're taking your coffee, you're doing something, and if you're like, well, I'm too busy, I drink my coffee as I'm driving. Be careful, right? I'll get burned or in a crash. But then wake up 10 minutes earlier that day and drink your coffee sitting down, and read the newsletter, or go into LinkedIn and look for folks that put content out that's relevant to your field, and take 5 minutes. This will put you ahead than 95% of folks in the field, and you're being part of a community just by doing 5 minutes. Now, if you can do more and then also give back, if you can, that's great. I mean, you give back every day with your work, absolutely. But if you're able to give back publicly, I encourage you to do so. We need more folks to let us know how they view things. And if you feel, oh, I don't know how to do this, it's okay. We're not here to judge you. Look,
Nope.
your
We
point
all
of
have to
view
start
is important.
somewhere,
Oh
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's something somebody else has done. Well, everybody knows how NTFS works. Yeah, but we don't know how you see it, how you visualize it. Maybe an analogy that you provide on how you understand it helps me at court that I never would have thought of before, right? And I love analogies. So I depend on folks in the community to broaden my mind. So don't think you have to come up with something that nobody has done before, and people are going to judge me and all that. As long as you are forthright and honest and say, look, this is what I've seen. I need some testing, more validation. Can somebody peer review me, show me where I can do better? Nobody's gonna jump on you. And especially you thinking, well, maybe they'll use that against me at court later. Well, I'll tell you that if what you're doing is sharing community knowledge, that actually builds you as an expert. When you go to a Dauber hearing, right, and they're kind of, well, what makes you an expert? Well, I'm a part of the community. Not only do I read research, I also put out my own content to be peer reviewed and be part of the community. I'm aware of the issues and of the solutions, right? And you build your credentials as an expert also by the talks you give, the interactions you have, and not only the studies that you've taken, because it's not so much what somebody taught you, it's what you are able to find and actually do for yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. So I recently just presented at the e-crime symposium, and I talked about the principles, the Daubert principles, and as well as the NIST guidelines. And as I was going through it, I couldn't stop thinking about, like, a lot of people live their lives like this, right? Which is important because you're living your life through transparency, you're giving back. It's going to help you down the long run. All of these things are going to help you. I know when you were talking about This Week in Forensics, where my brain went is sometimes I hate reading in the morning. I hate it. I need at least 4 cups of coffee to even get my brain to want to absorb an email. So for me, what my solution is I listen to podcasts, or I listen to whatever my significant other is listening to, because he's also in the same field as me. So sometimes I just have to listen to it, even if I don't want to. But
we're gonna listen to it.
So yeah, and it's not even just like, a lot of things aren't just about digital forensics for me. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, stuff that I'm interested in, like either fitness. I do marketing and sales for ArcPoint, so I listen to a lot of marketing and sales podcasts, which sounds just as exciting as watching paint dry. But sometimes for me, I pick up on tidbits. I'm like, oh, that's actually interesting, and I can apply that and feel authentic about what I'm doing. So I think that just listening to that podcast, and obviously this is a podcast, we're doing a podcast, but I think a lot of individuals too, when they sit down and they're like, okay, it's going to take me a long time to create content to explain maybe a walkthrough on how to image a certain device. I do this all the time, and I do this actually at the gym, where I will record a certain exercise, and it takes me less than 30 seconds to edit that video and to put it out onto social media. And so for someone who's doing digital forensics, what they can do is literally just record what they're doing anyways for their job, if you can, right? If you are in a facility that you're not allowed to record your work, then please do not do that. But if you can, you might as well do it. And then if you want to splice that video up later and kind of just have a talk over it and upload it to social media, you have now, congratulations, given back to the community. And it's like a win-win situation for everybody. It's a win for you, and it's a win for whoever picks up that video and actually applies it.
So many times I depend on that type of content to get something done. And adding to your point of podcasting, self plug here. Digital Forensics Now podcast. You can listen to us, every other week. Because when we came up, Heather Charpentier and myself came out with this podcast because we didn't see enough digital forensic centric podcasting. Now, that being said, you can listen to technology podcasts. I do a lot of mobile work, mobile forensics work, and I listen to the latest with Android or iOS. It's not digital forensics, but they talk about the features and all that, and that informs my testing, informs me seeing what the new features are. For example, now we have private spaces in Android, and we were already preparing for that because we heard about it a few months ago, how they ended up doing that way, using the multi-user functionality to create an additional user tied to the main user for folks to hide things. We knew all that coming months before because we listened to technology podcasts. And the moment it came out, we knew where we should be looking for it. And we found out that some of the current tools are missing data in there because they're not aware of it. So now we're filling the gap as examiners, and then for our work, and then the community. But it came out for previous knowledge that we had listening to a non-forensic podcast on a topic related to the field. So there's many ways you can do this. Like you're saying, you're driving and you're listening. In your case, you might be hostage to what you're listening to, but some other folks, you can pick what you listen to, and that's also part of your self-growth, and it will make you such a better examiner, and I believe a better human being.
Yeah, so one of the other podcasts I listen to is the Daily AI Show, which is sometimes I can make it through it. Sometimes I'm like, it's like way over my head. I'm like, you said what now? What? I'm not a mathematician. Like, but it helps me too, right? Because you're absorbing stuff no matter, what you're doing, if you're like actively listening or passively listening. So I think it's important.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
All right. Well, I love having you on the podcast. Also, if anyone's interested in doing a podcast, it's not very difficult. Like, I probably shouldn't tell people how I'm doing it, but I just record Google Meets, and that's that. That's it. So it's very easy. So I always encourage people to step out of their comfort zone. This is extremely uncomfortable for me, and here we are doing it. But
nobody can tell. You're doing great. So
thank you.
I couldn't tell.
It helps when you have a great guest like you, right? I mean, someone that you're comfortable with, that just like can talk very easily about the topics, and you just sit there. Yep.
You're too kind. Thank you.
It is a holiday podcast. So last year on the podcast, I asked everyone what their favorite movie was, but is there a favorite tradition that you have around the holidays that you like?
So I come from Puerto Rico. I don't want to take it off my wall, but you can see here the flag and some musical instruments here. Actually, I was in Puerto Rico yesterday, and
oh wow,
yeah, just flew in last night. And so for the Christmas season, I mean, not only Christmas season, but usually we have a thing called pasteles. So, and arroz con gandules. What that means is you take some plantain, you kind of smush it there, you fill it with meat or whatever, and you close it with the banana leaf, right? Or plantain leaf. You kind tie it with a string, and you boil that, use some good rice and I forgot to say, maybe it's a peas. I don't know how to say gandules in English. I think it's peas, and you do it all together and you eat. And there's a lot of in Puerto Rico like traditional eating for during the Christmas season. So that's always something I look forward to when Christmas comes, because of that expression of culture, and it's delicious. So
it sounds so good. I'm hungry too. I wish I didn't ask that question right now.
Too late. Let's go eat.
I actually look forward to a lot of different like traditional meal, like just side dishes that my family makes that we only make around the holidays, which is a shame. But I'm the same way. And like Christmas cookies, like I am a sucker for just like sugar cookies. I don't have to have frosting on or anything, just a nice sugar cookie. Like
I think it has enough calories as is, so the frosting's not
it's delicious. This is what I look forward to. Pair it with
Awesome.
coffee in the morning. I used to have a friend of mine, near and dear friend of mine, and she used to say, you can have cookies or cake for breakfast. And I was like, it's not very healthy. She's like, it has eggs and milk. I'm like, oh, okay. So now every time I have like a sweet treat in the morning, like it has eggs and milk. So Thank you, Beth, for
Look,
that.
look,
That's still in my head.
if that's the case, then I'm a vegetarian because cows eat grass, right? So there you go. I'm a vegetarian. I love this thought process. I love it.
Yeah, whatever gets us through the day. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I love having you as a guest, as always. And if anybody has any questions about the resources or anything like that, we'll make sure that we put them in the notes, not release notes. We'll make sure that they're up at the top so you don't have to go through the fine print.
Well done.
And that
Well
way you
done.
can check out some of the resources that we've mentioned in the show. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.